Hello, everyone. You are watching the Asian American Herald, a new media network. This show is being aired via live stream on Facebook, and a recording will be available afterwards at our Facebook page, Asian American Herald. My name is Himani Gupta Carlson, and I am a professor at Empire State College in Saratoga Springs, New York, as well as a community-based farmer and writer. So once again, I'm speaking tonight not from my usual home in New York, but at my parents' place in Muncie, Indiana, which lies in the traditional lands of the Kikiapoi peoples. I grew up in these lands, and I wish to offer respect tonight to the Kikiapoi as caretakers, and I want to really give them my thanks for allowing me shelter here for many, many years. So our guest tonight is Pooja Sethi, a daughter of Indian immigrants and an immigration attorney who currently is running for a council seat in the city of Austin, Texas. Pooja has lived in Austin since 2011. Prior to that, she completed a bachelor's degree at George Washington University and a law degree at Syracuse University, and she worked with a civil rights law firm in New York City. So she's got like an incredible wealth of experience, even before all she's done in Austin. So Pooja, welcome to our show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
We're so pleased to have you and to learn more about what you're doing. I'm actually very, very excited about your bid for the city council seat in Austin, particularly because I see these kinds of local governance spaces as vital to the growth of Asian American political participation. So I'd actually like to start by asking you to tell us more about your community and legal work in Austin and what motivated you to run for office. So please go ahead and begin.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, thank you all for having me. This is so wonderful. I have been part of local boards and commissions and task forces here in Austin since, I would say, even before 2016, when the very first one that I had joined was the mayor's task force on institutional racism and getting rid of and diminishing systemic inequities. I was on the criminal justice platform for that. And then I ended up joining the Asian American Quality of Life City Council Commission, and I'm on my second term for that. And that has been a very interesting commission. We have commissioners who kind of run the gamut of all different, conservative to more liberal. And it's just very interesting conversations because when we're talking about the Asian community, we see this across the nation where the Asian community kind of runs across a spectrum too of, the more very, very conservative all the way up to the more progressive. And I'm seeing even more and more progressive lately. So, and representing the Asian community in the best way possible. Through that, I've also been a part of the Office of Police Oversight, where we helped work on, and through my own work as an immigration attorney, I helped work on different policies to help our immigrant communities and our undocumented communities. And I have also been part of the Climate Equity Steering Committee. And, growing up for a lot of the Asian community, or at least in my house, we didn't talk a lot about environment and climate change growing up. It just never felt like a very big thing. It just felt very costly. And for first generation immigrants, that wasn't at the top priority for my parents at that time and for many of us. So that was something that I was really excited to be a part of to get our Asian community more involved into climate change. So those are just some of the things that I've been involved with. And then as an immigration attorney, I do a lot of work with different communities, and I run a nonprofit where I represent women who have faced family violence pro bono and survivors. Yeah.
That's really awesome, and that's quite a record. I am curious, how did that motivate you to run for office?
Yeah, so I started this thinking that I just want to get in and create some policies and help not just our community, but kind of be a bridge between our community and the whole city of Austin. And when I first moved to Austin, I had actually started an organization called South Asian Austin Moms Nonprofit. And that was really because I saw a lot of women having a hard time getting back into the workplace, especially in our community, and getting back to the workplace after we have children. And I had faced that discrimination a little bit myself. And I wanted to have a platform for women to join South Asian Austin Moms, get kind of a name and kind of get a resume builder to help them get back into the workforce. And I would say that every person who joined that nonprofit board with me now either runs their own practice, runs their own business, or is back into the workforce and into the jobs that they want. So I'm really excited by that. So that has just kind of built up from there until the mayor's task force and then the Asian quality of life. I mean, just one thing after another. And I just realized that as I got deeper into it, I thought, okay, it's just this one more thing, and then every voice will be heard on the dais and we'll be good to go. But it just wasn't enough. I mean, there's just gaps there. And then when COVID-19 hit and seeing how Black and brown communities were just hit so hard by this pandemic, it just made me realize that there's some real gaps in our city, and there needs to be a voice up there that is representing those voices on the ground and bringing those stories and experiences up to the dais. So when I'm talking about transportation, I'm talking about the woman who wants to leave her abusive spouse and who can't afford a car and has a way to get around the city. So.
Okay. Yeah, well, and I want to hear more about the demographics of Austin and kind of the political power balances in Austin in a bit. But I want to kind of go back down to your childhood and your family a little bit first. As I was reading up on you this morning, I came across a phrase that comes in your material often, that your father really instilled in you the value of working hard. And so I was wondering, can you take us back to your childhood and maybe also to your parents' childhoods? Where did they come from? When did they arrive in America? Where did you grow up? And how did this kind of experience of being kind of part of an immigrant community, but being an American-born member of an immigrant community inform your upbringing?
So my parents were raised in India. My father, did not grow up wealthy. He actually used to study really hard. He used to study, didn't even always have electricity, and had to go study under the streetlights on streets in India. And he worked really hard. So I think that is where he really feels like, that's where I think in his head he had put from a child, like, if I work hard, I will make it. If I work hard, I can get there. And so I think with that, he has really tried to instill that in us, that hard work always pays off. And it's actually interesting. I spoke at a supermajority event last year, and I had spoken about my own story of getting pregnant at my law firm in New York, and then having to work so many hours that I ended up having to leave. And, part of that speech was saying to my father, yes, hard work always pays off, but I have realized through my own years of living in this country that hard work pays off differently for different people. That hard work pays off differently if you're a woman. Hard work pays off differently if you are an Indian woman or a Black woman or a Black man. And so yes, I believe hard work always pays off, but I don't think it pays off equally for the same people. My mom is the one, she's also an immigrant from India, and she had given up her job and her career to raise me and my sisters. And one of her main things was always, she had told my father that I want them to be professionals. Whatever you do, I need my daughters to be professionals. And when I had my child and I had stopped working, and then we moved to Austin, I started South Asian Austin Moms. I think at one point I said, Mom, my son is starting preschool. And she said, okay, time for you to go back to work. I mean, they never let us, they never told us to stop. They said, you need to just keep pushing to wherever your dreams are. You just need to keep going. And without that, I wouldn't have been able to do any of the things that I'm doing today.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And I think your spin that it pays off differently for different people is really, really interesting. And that kind of brings me to the questions of immigration law. So those of us who follow immigrant detention issues and some of the horrific circumstances in which immigrants, particularly in the last few years, have been forced to arrive, are often confused by the intricacies of immigration law. And I know our show doesn't have, that much time to really go into it in great detail. But I was wondering, how do you break down some of those intricacies and work with your clients to create the best possible outcome?
So when it comes to detention centers, it is truly one of the most heartbreaking experiences. I mean, when I even thought of running for office, I'm not going to lie, I had a pain in a knot in my stomach before announcing for about a good week before I announced. I was very, very nervous. And I had actually had this joke that I'm just going to announce and then not tell anyone. And I was told by my campaign manager that that's a little ridiculous. But I think one thing that just keeps going in my head about the people who are in the ICE detention centers at Pearsall, which is about 3 hours away, is when I wake up during the campaign. And there are days when you are tired. I mean, you're working 14 to 16 hours a day. But then I think of these people who are in the ICE detention center and they don't have to be there. There are city policies that we could have put in place. There's things that we could have done for people, and they do not have to be sitting there away from their families and worried that they're going to have to go to a country that they haven't seen for the past 20 years. And so, I truly, I mean, that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me motivated. But I will say one of the major factors for me, even stepping into this race, and I tell this story a lot, is about a gentleman after the 2016 elections who was at my doorstep. He worked on our streets, and all our neighbors knew him. And he said, "I'm very nervous about the elections. What do I do?" And I said, "Well, just keep your head down, drive safe, and you'll be okay." Because I think at that point we had all hoped for the best, right? A few months later, I got a call from his 17-year-old son. This man had lived in Austin for 20 years. His 17-year-old son, that his father, the gentleman on my doorstep, had run through a stop sign, got picked up by our local law enforcement, got put in jail with an ICE detainer on him, and now he was in an ICE detention center, and now he's facing deportation proceedings. So I still tell everyone, be safe, keep your head down, but it's a really sad statement that I have to make to people that, just try not to leave your house. If there's ICE raids, don't open the door. And I do a lot of know your rights town halls in our community, across the community, for people so that they know what their rights are. And we try to do it with translation, and we try to do it, over in within the Muslim community, within the at the Hindu temples. We do it within the Asian community, the Latinx community. Like, we really try to make sure we are incorporating all communities when we are doing this.
Yeah. And when we think about, the common perception of detention is that it's full of individuals from Mexico. But I know that's not the case from some of the conferences I attend and some of the work that my colleagues do. What are you seeing in Austin in terms of, who's reaching out to you for help in that situation?
I have people from all backgrounds. I will say one of the cases that I had a year ago, I think it was last February, was when they did ICE raids they had set up a fake college in Michigan. And then a lot of people, especially from the Asian and the South Asian community, had signed up for that, thinking it was a full college, and gotten visas based on that. And then they had an ICE raid, I believe it was February of 2019. They had an ICE raid nationwide at 7 a.m. And I got a lot of phone calls, including calls from the Indian consulate, asking what was happening, because no one knew. And then I saw a lot of Asian and South Asian people who ended up in the detention center. So I have seen people from all different communities end up in the detention centers. I've also seen an uncle who was here on a visitor visa, and he got put into jail. He touched a woman's arm to ask for the time, and she said that he had assaulted her, and he got put into jail. And they didn't have, it wasn't in Travis County, it was a different county, but they didn't have proper food for him. They didn't have vegetarian food. They didn't have the translation services that he needed. And they didn't have a lot of the services he needed. And he ended up going without medication or food for at least 12 hours. So we are seeing people from different cultures, you're right, but we're not adapting to the cultures that we are picking up, and we're not providing the resources and the services that are needed to help different communities in these situations.
Oh, that's just, it's very, very sad. And the phrase you said earlier, keep your head down, just kind of drove a dagger into my heart, because I keep thinking about hold your head up high.
Yeah.
And so I guess, maybe this is a really difficult and sensitive question, but what can a lawyer do? in these situations to, I don't know, to at least remedy this somewhat?
Remedy at the detention centers or on?
Yeah,
Okay.
remedy at the detention centers, and also, the outreach, when people come and say, I'm afraid, besides saying, keep your head down and stay inside, what else can be done?
I mean, of course, we always try to find options for documentation. We try to figure out whatever we can do, whatever we can file for documentation. But there are situations where there's not much that we can do. So if someone is in the detention center, of course, we go up there, we represent them, we do a hearing, and hopefully are able to bond them out and get them home. And I will say, because of COVID, a lot of my cases had also been moved out. So I have actually gotten, and I'm referring them because I'm running for council right now, but I have actually gotten notices from the immigration courts for hearings that were meant to be this fall, and they got pushed all the way out to 2022. So people are having hearings. They are going to court. We're trying to figure out options, or we're trying to figure out if there's anything that they can do in order to stay in this country. But yes, there are legal remedies that we can do, and there's ways that we can pull them out of the detention centers. I think what's a shame is that when they're in the detention centers, it does take quite a while to get them out. And when they're in jail and they have an ICE hold on them, that means that they then go into the federal process, and it's not local anymore, and it's very difficult to get people out of that situation.
Wow. So as an elected official at the local level, what kind of change can you affect in that area?
So I am hoping some of my priorities are around transportation. I want people to be able to get to school, get to work, get to their daycares, get to healthcare on a bus, have transportation options so that we don't have so many people sitting in their cars getting pulled over. I also really want affordable housing. Austin being one of the most segregated cities in America, and was also rated by MoveOn.org as one of the most unaffordable cities for minimum wage workers. That we have way too many people who have to drive an hour outside of Austin to go home and drive back, and are not being able to spend time with their families. They're not able to get to work at a decent hour, and they are spending way too much time in their cars. So affordability, affordable housing, transportation are some of my top priorities. And I also fight for equity. I want to make sure that we are living in an equitable city where people just have safe streets, and we have equity going across our city no matter where we live.
Okay. And I did see that you were endorsed by one of the newspapers in Austin, the Chronicle. And while you weren't endorsed by the Statesman, they did seem to speak pretty positively of you. So it seems to me that you've got a pretty good chance at winning. And I don't want to jinx anything, but what, this is your first run for office. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting. I think it's hard to run during COVID, during a pandemic. This is something new for everyone. One of the things that I was most looking forward to was door knocking. I had done it for other candidates, and it was the thing I was most excited by, is just being able to knock on doors and say hi to neighbors. All I can say is we are all trying our hardest. We all just need to put forward our platforms. This is a very crowded race, but I'm hoping that we all put forward our platforms. I'm here to represent values that I believe in, values that the district believes in, values that the city of Austin believes in. And if the District 10 voters choose that, then fantastic. And if they choose to go a different way, then I will accept that as well. But I just know that we are in a time of extreme angst and economic downturn, pandemic, civil rights movement. And I really am just trying to give a voice to everyone and trying to get my message out there as much as possible. So I hope that it's resonating with voters, and I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see in November. It's hard with COVID to say anything. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to just kind of shift a little bit to the national political scene. And, particularly since we are a network for Asian American issues, I'd like to look at the role Kamala Harris played last night in representing voices of Blacks and South Asians in the vice president debate. So, how much do you feel what she said resonates with that particular part of the electorate, and to what extent does that actually matter?
So it's interesting. There was actually a Statesman article, speaking of the Statesman, yesterday that came out about this, that talked about Kamala Harris and local candidates and how the Asian and South Asian community is getting activated. I think it is so important. I held a postcard event, socially distanced with masks on, a few weeks ago, and that's when the reporter came and spoke to us from a distance as well. But they talked about it. They spoke about how for some of my friends, this is the first election that they are going to vote in because they're new citizens, and they are so excited by the prospect of being able to vote for someone who looks like them, who represents their values, that speaks about the immigrant mom who came to this country, right? Because they are immigrants themselves. And I think I always say this. I've been saying this for a year. When you have diverse ballots, you have diverse volunteers, you have diverse voters, and you have diverse staff. And this is how we win elections. And I will say also, I have seen a more diverse ballot in Travis County than I have seen prior. And I have seen more people activated, involved on social media and sharing than I've ever seen before. And I think this is the way of the future. And we need to be accepting of people of all genders, gender affiliation, race, and ethnicities, and we need to be accepting of everyone and support everyone on the ballot, because this is truly how we build coalitions at leadership levels and at the table.
Yeah, and that's really why I'm really excited about your bid and bids of others that at the local level that are trying to kind of make their first runs and win seats on city councils, county boards, spaces like that. And there is something that's called the coattail effect in American politics, where the success of a presidential ticket influences outcomes in Congress, but also local politics. And, obviously, based on what you've said in our time together tonight and what I've actually read about you, you have really advocated strongly for women and for working women and for working mothers. And so I'm wondering how you see Harris's place on the Democratic ticket helping candidacies like yours.
How do I see Kamala Harris's place?
Yeah. On the demo, is there going to be? I hate to call it a coattail, but is there going to be? I don't know, like a skirt tail effect.
Well, I would say one of the things that I love in that we South Asian space is our names, right? Like we don't have what people consider the typical Anglo name when running for office. So to have a vice president whose name is Kamala is amazing. That means that voting for somebody like Pooja won't feel so out of it. You're hearing this woman, and so we are normalizing seeing more and more people on the ballots, more and more people of different ethnicities. And I think that definitely has an effect on people feeling more comfortable to run for office, more leadership path. I definitely see that. I will also say, and this isn't Kamala, but we did see it in Texas in 2018 when Beto ran. We saw Beto, he didn't end up winning in Texas, but he did pull up a lot of candidates and brought them to either winning or very close to winning through his own work. So you are right. This is definitely something, having the right people on the ballots and supporting people definitely brings out different voters and can help in every way.
You had mentioned the kind of like the diverse slate of candidates in Travis County, and I'm presuming Travis County is the county that Austin is in. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that and talk about and kind of relate it to what the demographics are of Austin, as well as the district that you're running in. Sure.
So Austin is not, I think as of a few years ago, is not a plurality of any one race. So it is, I think, at 51 or 52% of diverse non-white, and then I think it was about 48% white. My district is 70% to 75% white Caucasian, around 13% Asian, I believe. Yes. Sorry. Yes. And so, yes, and our district is not as diverse, but it has a lot of diverse thought. And I don't know, our district is the second largest Asian population in the city of Austin. And I would say, just in relation to the Asian population, it's the fastest growing demographic in the city right now. And it's meant to double, I think, in the next few years.
Yeah, and that kind of mirrors statistics that seem to be coming out nationally, and I keep hearing kind of repeated with various guests that we've had on the show over the past several months. And I think it's interesting that Austin you've just described it as a plurality, and you have also described it a little bit earlier as highly segregated. So I'm wondering, how then do you work with Black, Latinx, Asian communities to create effective multiracial coalitions, and also with the white community?
Yeah, I agree. So that's literally why there's a bridge on my logo. So I will say one thing, and we were talking about this in the AAPI forum yesterday, is I think one of the things that I would love to see, because I think we as the AAPI community, we just have a history of growing up in neighborhoods where we don't look like anybody. So I think that we have a great skill in relating to different communities and bringing people together. So I try to listen to all voices. So being on the Asian American Quality of Life Commission, I will say one of the most exciting things that we did for me this year that I helped put forward was we always put in our budget on the needs of the Asian community. And this year we had actually said that we are not going to raise the amount of budget that we're asking from the city of Austin, because we understand and recognize that the Latinx and the Black community need more around COVID response and COVID resources than we do. So we want to pull together, and I want to see more joint efforts like that. I think it's really important that we join together, figure out the needs of each community, and really start advocating and pushing for resources that are necessary.
Okay. We have not, I almost always dwell on COVID when I'm talking with guests on the show, partly because it weighs heavily on me, and it is directly, it's really impacting our society and how we live. So let me just ask you about the COVID situation in Austin and how people are kind of working with it.
I didn't hear the second part of your second.
Okay, so how are people working with
question? But I can just speak about COVID if that's okay.
Go for it.
I will say one thing. I will say Austin. It's a little bit difficult in Austin because we have a local government that is trying to implement policy, and then we have a state governor and statewide government that is clashing with some of the local policies that they want to put into place and to represent our city. Texas is really big. I mean, you have rural towns with not that many people that are maybe able to recover from this, to a denser city like Austin that may need, and Houston and Dallas that may need different policies in place to help with the situation. So here in Austin, I think that the city did a great job with canceling South by Southwest. I think that was very smart on their part when they did that, the festival.
Yeah.
But I think after that, there could have been more done. I think that there could have been, I would have advocated for more testing sites into communities of color. There's also a mask ordinance that was put into place, and I would have fought to make sure that lower income communities and our unhoused populations had access to masks. I did a lot of work. We called it the quarantine, but we worked with EMS in the city to get our homeless population's food every day, because some of the people didn't have the same resources after some of the shelters or some of the kitchens and things had to shut down, and they couldn't provide food anymore for the homeless communities. So we really put in efforts to get food and masks. So I think that the community did a really good job stepping up to do the stopgap. And I think that in hindsight, I wish that there were some things that the city had put into place to help us get there even faster. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was saying we're not, as far as we know, I would have liked to see also a stronger contact tracing plan in place. I've seen one put into place in Philadelphia that they felt like was pretty successful. And it also had aspects of if you're undocumented or an immigrant, we won't ask your immigration status. And they had that right there on the website. And I think in Texas, that might have been really, really helpful to get people to feel comfortable about testing and to report that they have COVID and to kind of do the contact tracing around that. So we have not seen that as much. So I think there's things that we could have been put into place, and I hope moving forward we figure out how we can help everyone around this and not just a few.
Okay. So we are actually out of time. I think this has been a wonderful, stimulating conversation. I wish you the best of luck with your campaign, and I will be hopefully shooting you a congratulatory message in a few weeks. But I just want to thank you again tonight for taking the time to join our show and to share your thoughts. And I want to just thank everyone else for joining us this evening for our weekly Asian American Herald show. I'm Hamani Gupta Carlson, and my guest has been Pooja Sethi, a candidate for City Council in Austin, Texas, and an immigration rights attorney. So the Asian American Herald is a Facebook-based news media outlet dedicated to discussing topics and building community among Asian Americans in the capital region of New York and well beyond. And so we invite you all to please send us your story ideas and look for the recording of the show on our Facebook page, and have a good evening. Thank you all so much, and thank you, Pooja.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a